Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday Night Touchdown Podcast NCAA Season Preview and Week 0 Picks episode. I am Jacob, co-host Reese over here with me. Reese, great news. There are no more Saturdays without college football. How do you feel about that?
I love it, man. I love it. Been waiting for this for a long time. Ready to get the ball rolling here.
Yes, it is a very exciting time of the year. On this episode, we're going to be previewing top 4 teams in the Power 5 Conference and the MAC. And then we're also going to be predicting conference championship game. After that, we're going to follow up with the college football playoff predictions. And at the end of the episode, we're actually going to finally pick some games, the Week 0 games. There's only 7 of them, but hey, it's games to pick. It'll be a fun time. Anything before we get rolling on the ACC, Reese?
Nah, man, let's go.
All right, cool. So we will start off with the worst team in the nation. They are the favorite to win the ACC at plus 150. Clemson Tigers. Worst coach ever. Hate this guy. Last year, they were 11-3, 8-0 in the conference. They did win the ACC championship, beating North Carolina. The 3 losses last year were to Notre Dame, South Carolina, and then their bowl game, the Orange Bowl, they did lose to Tennessee, which was a backup quarterback. Some changes in the offseason. They brought in Garrett Riley from TCU to run their offense. At TCU, he had the 9th highest scoring offense, 38.8 points per game. They did go to the national championship. And he did win the Broyles Award, which he was the top assistant coach in college football last year. And we saw what happened in the national championship. Georgia was just too much for him. Bringing back 16 starters, 8 on offense, 8 on defense. Dabo's not too big on the portal, so not really a whole lot there. They did bring in a quarterback from Arizona State, Paul Tyson. And biggest loss for them, DJU going to Oregon State. He wasn't going to play this year anyway because of Cade Klubnik, but they did lose some depth at quarterback and some person with experience. And then their linebacker, TJ Dudley, went to Ole Miss. Some returning players, like we just mentioned, quarterback Cade Klubnik. Running back Will Shipley, which is, for playing for Clemson, he is one of my favorite players to watch. He's very fun. He's basically like a mini Christian McCaffrey. 4 of their 5 linemen are back. Linebacker Jeremiah Trotter Jr., which I mentioned last time on the non-quarterback players to watch. Linebacker Barrett Carter, and then defensive lineman Tyler Davis, which all 3 of those guys could be in the running for ACC Defensive Player of the Year. Reese, what are your thoughts on the Tigers this year?
Yeah, we'll see, man. I mean, they went, 11-3 last year, undefeated in the ACC. They have finished outside of the top 10 in the past 2 seasons, which is a little different than, their more recent years. Garrett Riley coming in from TCU, I think, is going to make a difference on their offense. They've got a couple decent games on the schedule. Their first real test is going to be Florida State, September 23rd, and then they've got Notre Dame, I think, November 4th. And then they finish the regular season in Columbia against South Carolina there November 25th. So obviously we're going to dive a little bit more into some of the other ACC teams here, but I do not think they are going to get out of the ACC undefeated this year, and I do not think that they are going to win the ACC title. So we'll see how all that shakes out here as we move forward. But yeah, I offense, like I said, I think offense is going to look a little better this year with Garrett Riley coming in, but yeah, I do not see them winning the ACC this year.
All right, so we're going to move to number 2 with the odds at plus 170, Florida State Seminoles. Last year finished 10-3, 5-3 in the conference. Their losses were to Wake Forest, NC State, and Clemson. They finished winning 6 in a row, though, ending the year in the Cheez-It Bowl, where they beat Oklahoma with the greatest mascot. Prince Chedward was there to hand out the trophy of all the Cheez-Its. They are bringing back the number 1 percentage of production, 87%. 8 starters on offense, 8 starters on defense. Portal is crazy when it comes to Florida State. They are very much a portal team. They will lose guys and they will bring in guys. I'm going to go through just some to note, and these aren't even all of them, and there's a lot. Guys that they lost: linebacker Amari Gaynor, North Carolina. Wide receiver Malik McClain to Penn State, which I think he is going to be huge for Penn State. I love Malik McClain. He's a big loss. Wide receiver Micah Pittman to Utah, which he was a transfer in from Oregon. He's been all over the country. The biggest loss to me, though, and I mentioned this last week, I love running back Trayshawn Ward going to Kansas State. It's really going to suck with him not being on the team. Guys we brought in, though, These are some studs. Cornerback Fintrell Cypress from Virginia, wide receiver Keon Coleman from Michigan State, tight end Jaheim Bell from South Carolina, and a defensive lineman Braden Fisk from Western Michigan. And like I said, that's just a few of them. They had so many portal guys, it's crazy. Bringing back quarterback Jordan Travis, preseason Heisman contender. The offense runs through him. He's very exciting to watch. Beside him, running back Trey Benson. He's going to be a little bit more of the focal point because Trayshawn's gone. Lawrence Tuafili's still going to be there to counter him, but Trey's going to have a huge year, I think. 6'7" wide receiver Johnny Wilson's still back, bringing back 3 of the 5 on the O-line. First round, or would have been first round draft pick Jared Verse at defensive ends coming back, and defensive rookie of the year from the ACC Patrick Payton still there. Reese, you probably know how I feel. How do you feel about the Noles?
I do know how you feel, and I reciprocate those feelings. They did finish 10-3 last year, won that bowl game against Oklahoma. Recruiting class is one of the best transfer classes in the country. You mentioned Jordan Travis being in the Heisman conversation, opening up the season against LSU, so that's definitely going to set the pace. Arguably the toughest game on their schedule, so if they are going to take a loss this year, get it knocked out in week 1. I think we've seen from the college football playoff standpoint that early losses do not hit you as hard as those late season losses. They've got LSU September 3rd, at Clemson September 23rd, at Pitt November 4th, at home against Miami November 11th, and then finish in Gainesville against the Gators on November 25th. We just talked a little bit about how I don't think Clemson is going to win the ACC this year, and it's because I do believe that Florida State is going to win the ACC, and I believe that they are going to be in the college football playoff this year. They are bringing back a ton of studs. You just talked through a lot of the transfer guys that they've got in play. I think this is the year for the Noles, first year in a while anyway, to really make some noise in the college football playoff.
Yeah, and with the first 3 games, I mean, you got LSU, and then 2 games later, it's Clemson. So by the end of September, we're going to know quite a bit about Florida State.
Yeah, absolutely.
Next, we have Pitt at plus 1,100. So as you notice, there was already a big jump in the odds there. Last year, they were 9-4, 5-3 in the conference. They did end up beating UCLA in the Sun Bowl to finish the year. They're only returning 11 starters, 6 on offense, 5 on defense. Transfer-wise, another quarterback that's been all over the world. They lost quarterback Keaton Slovis to BYU, but they did bring in Phil Jerkovich from Boston College. And they also running back Derek Davis Jr. from LSU, and then a safety Donovan McMillan from Florida. Returning, they did bring back 2 of their wide receivers, Bub Means and Kanata Mumpfield. 3 of the starters on the O-line are back, and cornerback Marquise Williams and MJ Devonshire are back also. Reese, how you feel about Pitt?
Yeah, we'll see. Coach Narduzzi, he's got a 62-41 record. He does have a combined 20 wins since 2021, which is second only to Clemson in the ACC. So Pitt's going to be a tough play no matter who they're playing. I think they went 9-4 last year. Their 2 big scheduled games to me this year are at Notre Dame October 28th and then Florida State November 4th. As you mentioned, the odds there jump quite a bit from plus 170 at Florida State to plus 1,100 for Pitt. I can see them making some noise and ruining some seasons potentially, but I do not see them competing for the ACC championship. But I am interested to see how that team is playing this year because, like I said, they've played pretty well here the past 2 years, and Narduzzi's got them playing pretty well.
Yep. And the other the 4th best odds, which again is a plus 1,100, same as Pitt, is North Carolina. Last year finished 9-5, 6-2 in the conference though, losing only to they lost to Clemson and then they lost in the ACC championship game. No, sorry, they lost to Clemson in the ACC championship game. Oregon in the Holiday Bowl was one of the other losses, and then Notre Dame. 4 games: Georgia Tech, NC State, Clemson, Oregon. Those were the 4 losses, other than Notre Dame. Yeah,
they lost I think 3 of those 4 games by 4 points or less, so they were all pretty close games.
Right. And returning 13 starters, 6 on offense, 7 on defense. Transfer information, they did lose cornerback Tony Grimes to A&M. And one of my favorite names I've ever seen ever, cornerback Storm Duck. He went to Penn State. That's a name you have to watch out for. Bringing guys in, wide receiver Devontae Walker from Kent State. And then they did bring in the linebacker I mentioned earlier from Florida State, Amari Gaynor. Returning another preseason Heisman candidate and a very, very early first-round NFL draft pick, Drake May at quarterback. 3 of the 5 on the O-line. Linebacker Cedric Gray. He did lead the Power 5 in tackles last year. Reese, what do you think of North Carolina?
Yeah, I mean, it's that Mac Brown squad, right? So they started 9-1 last year, and like we just mentioned, they lost their last 4 games. 3 of those last 4 were by 4 points or fewer, so they are going to have to learn how to win those close games. So I think you said 5 returning starters on offense, 7 on defense. They did lose a majority of their secondary, and that defense was a problem for them last year, kind of as we just mentioned. Plus 1,100, if we're looking at between North Carolina and Pitt, I would put Pitt ahead of them. But overall, from the ACC, as we round things up here, I'm picking Florida State to win the conference championship.
Yeah, one other thing to note real quick on North Carolina also, they did lose their offensive coordinator, Phil Longo, to Wisconsin, which for Drake May, that could end up being a huge loss.
Yeah, so he went up there with Luke Fickell, right?
Correct. And so you said for the ACC Conference Championship, you do have the Noles winning?
That's correct.
And who do you have them beating?
Clemson.
So I have that exact same game. I have Florida State and Clemson playing also, with Florida State beating them. It's one of those things where with the divisions being gone in the ACC this year, it could end up being a kind of a good thing for Florida State because, like I said, they play LSU and Clemson both early in the year. If they do drop that game to Clemson, it's not an automatic you're done like it was before. Now there is a chance to get that rematch with them in Charlotte for the ACC championship.
Yeah.
All right. So for the next conference, we're going to go to the Big Ten. Number 1 odds in the East is going to be Ohio State at plus 165. Last year they finished 11-2, 8-1 in the conference. Their only loss in the conference was to Michigan. And then they did end up losing to the eventual national champion, Georgia, in the college football playoff semifinals in one of the better college football games of last year. That game was incredible.
Yeah, it was.
Returning 12 starters, 7 on offense, 5 on defense. A little bit of question is who's going to be the quarterback. It sounds like it's going to be Kyle McCord, even though they still haven't officially announced, or Devin Brown. But the good news is they play IU in their first game, so they're both probably going to play. So it doesn't really matter. Transfer to note, this is actually a big deal for me because they did lose cornerback J.K. Johnson to LSU, which then proceeded to get injured, and so he is going to be out for the Florida State game. So, but we'll get to that a little later when we get to LSU, but that is a huge loss. But in safety, Jahad Carter from Syracuse, returning the best wide receiver room in the nation is what they're returning. Wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Egbuka, I think is how you pronounce his name. Running back Mayan Williams and running back Travion Henderson. Reese, I know you're a fellow fan of the Buckeye. What do you feel about their year this year?
Yeah, we'll see. They lost the last 2 games of the year last year at home against Michigan, and then they barely lost against Georgia, as you mentioned, one of the better college football games of the year last year, and frankly, one of the better college football games we've seen in the past few years. 7 returning starters, including Marvin Harrison Jr., as you mentioned, who, of all of the non-quarterbacks in the league, is up there in the Heisman conversation. They've got 5 guys returning on defense. I'm a little surprised that they are ahead of Michigan in this. And the reason for that, and we're going to talk about Michigan here in a second, but if you look at their schedule against what Michigan has this year, I think they have a tougher road to go undefeated. They've got Notre Dame at Notre Dame September 23rd. They're at home against Penn State October 21st. They're at Wisconsin October 28th, which is going to be an interesting game to watch with Luke Fickell at the helm now at Wisconsin. And then they're at Michigan November 25th. On top of that, with QB being a little bit of a question now that Stroud's in the NFL, and it looks like Kyle McCord's probably going to be taking over, they definitely have a harder schedule than Michigan, in my opinion, and I can see that being a difficult road for them to get to the point where they're in the Big Ten championship to play for the East. So we'll see what happens. It'll be an interesting year. Ryan Day's fifth full year, I should say, at the helm. So interested to see how they're going to play out. I really do think that Marvin Harrison could make a play at Heisman. We'll see what kind of numbers he puts up here. I think it's going to be, he's a junior now, right? Junior or senior. So he's probably going to be entering the draft after this year, but
yeah, he'll be going pro.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, I'm a little surprised that they're sitting just above Michigan as far as odds go.
Yeah, I agree with that because I know we talked in the last episode about how terrible Georgia's schedule is. Michigan's is almost as bad. Like
Yeah.
Michigan has a few tougher games, but I mean it's kind of laughable. We're gonna get into Michigan though. Plus 180. They did finish 13-1 last year, 9-0 in the conference, winning the Big Ten championship by beating Purdue, mighty Purdue, in the Big Ten title game. They did lose to TCU in the college football playoff semifinals. Apparently, Jim Harbaugh's suspension doesn't matter anymore. This whole situation is crazy. The NCAA, I don't know what they're doing, but apparently he's back, so he's going to be there for every game now. They are returning 11 starters, 5 on offense, 6 on defense, but they are bringing back the 5th-ranked NCAA production at 81%. Some transfers. They did lose tight end Eric All and quarterback Cade McNamara to Iowa, safety R.J. Moten to Florida, and then they brought in linebacker Ernest Hausman from Nebraska, inside lineman Arizona State Ladarius Henderson, and an edge rusher from Coastal Carolina Josiah Stewart. Returning some key players, running back Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, quarterback J.J. McCarthy, wide receiver Roman Wilson, and then 2 linebackers, Junior Colson and Michael Barrett, with cornerback Will Johnson. Reese, I know we just talked a little bit about the schedule. What do you think about Michigan?
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of echo the sentiment of what we just talked about here, Michigan's schedule is not nearly as tough as Ohio State's. They have a pretty light schedule until November when they do play Penn State at Penn State. I'll talk about that game here in a little bit more in just a second here, but at home against the Buckeyes on the 25th, they've won the last 2 years, including one at the Big House 2 years ago. So, yeah, Harbaugh's 9th year. It's hard to believe he's been there almost a decade. But on the East side, I do think that they're the favorites right now to come out on top. I honestly like Ohio State's offense a little bit more than I do Michigan's. J.J. McCarthy is returning, and he does have some experience playing starter, and they've got Blake Corum there and 6 total starters there, 7 on defense. So they're bringing a bunch of guys back, and Harbaugh's Harbaugh, so he's going to have those guys ready. But, I just think Ohio State, if they come into this game undefeated, it's going to be advantage Ohio State, because they're going to be far more battle tested than what Michigan is. I honestly think that the game at Penn State is more of a question mark for Michigan than the Ohio State Michigan game is at the Big House, and that's coming from somebody who's rooted for the Buckeyes. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I'm surprised that this isn't flip flopped and they're not sitting at plus 165 and Ohio State's not sitting at plus 180. So.
Yeah, I was surprised by that also. It was a weird thing to see. I was actually really shocked by that. Moving on to the third team, it is Wisconsin at plus 900, which is over in the west side. Last year, 7-6, 4-5 though in the conference. They did lose to Washington State, Ohio State, Illinois, Michigan State, Iowa, and Minnesota, and then they ended the year with a bowl win against Oklahoma State. The big change, head coach Luke Fickell coming in from Cincinnati, bringing in offensive coordinator Phil Longo from North Carolina, like we mentioned earlier, and defensive coordinator Mike Tressel from Cincinnati just coming along with him. This is one of my favorite things I've seen also is changing the name of the air raid to the dairy raid because it's in Wisconsin. That's an incredible name. I love it.
Yes.
There's a little bit of misconception with Longo though. People think that he's just going to sling it all over the place. And that he loves to run the ball. Like I think it's huge for them. I think Braylon Allen's going to have a huge year at running back just because it's going to be not a stacked box against him every game. He's actually going to have room now. What were we going to... So the returning 11 starters, only 5 on offense, 6 on defense. Quarterback Graham Mertz went down to Florida. He has been named the starter for Florida. Offensive tackle Logan Brown has gone to Kansas. And then the big guy, quarterback Tanner Mordecai from the horse team SMU, who will be the starter for them. Wide receiver CJ Williams from USC. And then defensive lineman Darian Varner came over from Temple. The key players returning, like just mentioned, running back Braylon Allen. I think he's going to have a huge year. Left tackle Jack Nelson and a safety Hunter Wohler. All right, Reese, a lot of changes in Madison. What do you think of the Badgers?
Yeah, a lot of changes. Fickell's first season there, as you mentioned. I'm excited to see how that's all going to play out. He's obviously very familiar with the Big Ten. Their schedule is really not that bad. Iowa and Ohio State are the two toughest games on the schedule, in my opinion. West is obviously a much easier path to the title game. I don't foresee whoever comes out of the West beating whoever comes out of the East, but I do think that right now on the West side, Wisconsin and Luke Fickell's bunch is currently the favorite to come out on top there on the West.
Yep, I agree. And battling with them will be Iowa, plus 1,200 to win the conference. Last year, 8-5, 5-4 in the conference. They did lose to Iowa State, Michigan, Illinois, Ohio State, and Nebraska. And then they finished the year beating Kentucky in the Music City Bowl. They're bringing back 12 starters, 7 on offense, 5 on defense. Just some guys to note, they did lose linebacker Justin Jacobs to Oregon and wide receiver Arlen Bruce to Oklahoma State, and also another wide receiver, Keegan Johnson, to Kansas State. I don't know how are Iowa. I guess they went to Iowa thinking they might throw the ball. Like, I don't understand what these guys thought. Brought in quarterback Cade McNamara from Michigan and tight end Eric All, like we mentioned on the other one. Wide receiver Caleb Brown coming in from Ohio State, and then a linebacker Nick Jackson from Virginia. So they are bringing in some guys from around the Big Ten, basically a lot of guys who weren't going to start because there was so much depth there that they said, oh, let's go to Iowa and contend. They are bringing back the entire offensive line, which at Iowa is huge. 2 defensive tackles, Logan Lee and Noah Shannon, and a defensive end, Deontay Craig. So, I mean, Iowa's going to be good. Like, they're Iowa. That's what they do. Are they going to win 10-6, or are they actually going to score points this year? That's going to be the big thing.
Right.
And one other player to note, just because their Heisman every year, is punter Torrey Taylor is back.
Okay.
What do you feel about Iowa?
We'll see. I think the first thing I want to call out is this is Ferentz's 25th year, which is just nuts. I mean, to have that kind of stay at any college is impressive. For him to be there for 25 years is pretty crazy. They've got Penn State and Wisconsin as the 2 toughest games on their schedule. They could win the West, second time in 3 years. It wouldn't surprise me if they come out on top. Cade McNamara there, and then you mentioned a couple of the other transfer guys there to be making a difference. So we'll see what happens. I do think Wisconsin's the favorite there, but it would not surprise me one bit if Iowa ends up back into the Big Ten Conference championship. And as we're wrapping things up here, one team that I did want to mention, not in the West but in the East, and we brought this up just a little bit ago, but I can absolutely see Penn State winning the Big Ten title this year and end up in the college football playoff. We'll talk about it a little bit more. They have to get that over that Ohio State and Michigan hump because Franklin's lost both of those games in 5 of the last 9 seasons. So he doesn't have a great track record against Ohio State and Michigan, and they are not on down years. So it's going to be tough, but Franklin has arguably the best QB that he's had since he's been there. And it's very possible that they could take their first title since 2016. So if the reason why I'm bringing this up is because we are picking conference championship games. And I've been thinking about this a lot, and I may change my tone before the season actually gets underway. But right now I'm going to throw a little wrench into things and say that Penn State's going to meet Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship.
Yeah, I mean, I could easily see that. I did some looking into this also because I was thinking, what happens if these guys all beat each other? Penn State, Ohio State, and who's the other one? Penn State, Michigan. And I got to the 5th. Like, it's going to go to the 5th tiebreaker if that happens, and it's based off of, it was something crazy, like your opponent, your divisional or your conference opponents' win records, and I think the edge went to Ohio State a little bit there because Penn State played someone that was really bad, and I think that was what took them down. Yeah, I got like deep into it, and I was like, God, this is crazy that we even have to do this for a tiebreaker. But I can easily see Penn State being there. It is not what I have in my predictions. I actually do have Michigan winning the division, beating Wisconsin at plus 180. But it's gonna be fun to watch those games because those are all gonna be very competitive games when they play each other.
Yeah, Big Ten's gonna be fun this year.
So let's go over to the Big 12, which we've added some teams here. Big 12 now has Cincinnati, Houston, UCF, and BYU. So we've added quite a bit here, actually. The favorite, which we made a little joke of in the last episode, is Texas. Is Texas going to be Texas, or are they going to actually play well? So it'll be. I mean, we mentioned it last week. Like you said, this team, the roster is loaded. Like, they are good. But they're Texas. So
Yeah.
we'll get into them. Last year, 8-5, 6-3 in the conference. They did lose to Alabama when Quinn Ewers got hurt. They were in great position to win that game. Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, TCU, and then they did finish the year losing to one of my favorites, the Washington Huskies, in the Alamo Bowl, which was an underdog in that game and made 0 sense to me, so thank you, Vegas, for that. They are returning 15 starters, 9 on offense, 6 on defense. Transfer to note, quarterback Hudson Card is now a Boilermaker and will be starting for them. Wide receiver Brennan Thompson went to Oklahoma in my biggest what the fuck is going on in college football moment. Why is a guy from Texas going to Oklahoma? That makes no sense and should not even be allowed. They are bringing in a wide receiver, Adonai Mitchell from Georgia, cornerback Gavin Holmes from Wake Forest, and safety Jalen Catalone from Arkansas. Just mentioned him, key returning player, quarterback Quinn Ewers. This team is going to go as far as he goes. I know they have Arch Manning. All of the reports are he is not ready to go yet. And Quinn, I mean, we saw what Quinn could do last year at the beginning of the year. He looked like an absolute stud. Wide receiver Xavier Worthy's back, edge Barron Sorrell, linebacker Jalen Ford. All right, Reese, I know last week you were the one that threw in the comment, but they're Texas. So how do you feel about them?
They are Texas, so we'll see what happens. 8-5 record last year. Sarkisian's third year there. They like you said though, they are loaded. They have 9 returners on offense, 6 on defense. I think solid recruiting class. Definitely the front runners right now. I think they're going to come out on top on the Big 12. I think looking at some of these other teams, and we're diving a little bit into it: Oklahoma, Kansas State, Texas Tech. Texas can be Texas. We've said it a bunch, but as of right now, plus 100 makes sense to me. I think right now the second closest team there, I arguably I think it's Kansas State. I know Oklahoma's a little bit ahead of them right now. I honestly think Kansas State's a little bit closer than Oklahoma as far as this is concerned. But as of right now, I've got them as the favorites to win the Big 12.
All right, and as you mentioned, Oklahoma, we'll jump to them. They are plus 420. Last year finished 6-7, 3-6 in the conference. They lost to Kansas State, TCU, Texas, Baylor, West Virginia, Texas Tech, and ended the year losing to the Noles, Prince Chedward. Returning 12 starters, 5 on offense, 7 on defense. Some transfers to note. They did lose cornerback Jaden Davis to Miami, wide receiver Theo Weiss to Missouri, while bringing in a linebacker from IU, Deshaun McCullough, a wide receiver from Texas, Brennan Thompson, and a defensive lineman, Trace Ford, from Oklahoma State, which, again, why is this happening? Like, what is going on in the Big 12? Like, you don't go to your rival. It makes no sense at all to me. Key returning players, defensive end Ethan Downs, offensive lineman Tyler Guyton, and running back Javante Barnes. Second year under Brent Venables. What do you think for Oklahoma?
I don't know. They were at 6-7 last year.
Yep.
Schedule seems a little bit more forgiving this year with the conference expansion, but 2022 was not a great year for them. Venables got some pressure on him for only being in there in year two to turn it around quickly. I just mentioned it here a little bit ago, but I honestly have Kansas State a little bit ahead of Oklahoma, so we'll see what happens. But at plus 420, I'm not buying it. Yeah,
and last week I professed my love for Kansas State a little, so we'll get to them next at plus 500. Last year, 10-4, 7-2 in the conference. They did beat TCU to win the Big 12 championship. They lost to TCU in the regular season, and then they did lose to Alabama in the Sugar Bowl. Bringing back 12 starters, 7 on offense, 5 on defense. The transfer to note that they lost was linebacker Crew Jackson, Arizona State, and then they did bring in, like I mentioned earlier, running back Trayshawn Ward from Florida State and wide receiver Keegan Johnson from Iowa. Some key returning players, quarterback Will Howard, running back DJ Giddens. They are bringing back the whole O-line, which Trayshawn Ward should love. Tight end Ben Snott, linebacker Daniel Green, and linebacker Austin Moore. I absolutely love this team, as I told you last week, and I will definitely be mentioning them here in a few minutes. What are your thoughts on Kansas State?
We'll see. They lost a lot of talent in the NFL draft. Will Howard, senior, coming back to lead the offense, and this is Kleiman's 5th year, so that's a benefit to the team. Some stability there. We'll dive into what we're picking as far as Big 12 championship here in a second, but I do like Kansas State as a team.
All right, and then let's go at plus 1,100, Texas Tech. Last year they did finish 8-5, 5-4 in the conference with losses to NC State, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Baylor, and TCU. They did finish the year with a Texas Bowl win against Ole Miss, bringing back 14 starters, 8 on offense, 6 on defense. A couple guys that they lost, defensive lineman Philip Bleedy to IU and safety Reggie Pearson Jr. to Oklahoma. They did bring in edge rusher Steve Linton from Syracuse and safety CJ Bakersfield from San Diego State. Some key returning players, defensive lineman Tony Bradford, DB Malik Dunlap, wide receiver Jerron Bradley, and another wide receiver Miles Price, and then quarterback Tyler Shuck. What do you think about Texas Tech this year? I do know that Oregon is coming to them early in the year, and Shuck is from Oregon. He was a transfer, so I think that's going to be a fun one to watch. And I really, for Oregon's sake, with as tough as the Pac-12 schedule are, I have no idea why they made that game. They should not be going there. But what are your thoughts on the Red Raiders?
Yeah, I'm not sure either. The Texas Tech has got too difficult of a schedule this year, man. I mean, second year for Joey McGuire as the head coach. As you mentioned, they've got 8 returners coming back on offense and 6 on defense, but they play Oregon, at Baylor, Kansas State, TCU, and at Texas. That's a gauntlet of a schedule for Texas Tech. There's a reason why they're plus 1,100, and frankly, I'm surprised it's not a little bit more than that. Wrapping things up, I can see TCU possibly being in the mix here to win the conference, but it would take a lot for them to get here. I don't think they're the same team they were last year. To me, Texas is the front runner. But looking at Texas, Kansas State in the Big 12 championship, and I think Kansas State's going to come out on top.
Did you say Texas, Kansas State?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is my exact prediction also. I have Kansas State plus 500 beating Texas in the Big 12 championship game. So we are thinking on the same lines there. Moving over next to the Pac-12, cue the funeral music. This conference is dead. But they are going to go out with a bang, though, because, first off, this is a sad day for me because I absolutely love the Pac-12. I love Pac-12 after dark. You don't see crazier shit in football than at 1 a.m. and what's going on in the West Coast, and it's incredible. It's awesome. It's so much fun. I'm glad that we're going to end it this year, though, the way we are, because this conference is awesome. I absolutely love this conference. There's so many good teams. It's going to be very fun to watch. We're going to kick it off. The favorite, USC, plus 200. Last year finished 11-3, 8-1 in the conference, losing to Utah in the Pac-12 championship game, and they lost to them in the regular season. And then one of the better bowl games last year, they lost to Tulane in the Cotton Bowl. Bringing back 14 starters, 6 on offense, 8 on defense. They are portal kings, just like Florida State and LSU. These guys use the portal to their advantage. I'm just going to do a quick run through. There's a lot here. So guys that they lost, wide receiver C.J. Williams to Wisconsin, wide receiver Gary Bryant Jr. to Oregon. Why? And here we go again. Wide receiver Kyle Ford went to UCLA. What is going on? I don't understand this. That should not be legal. Guys that they brought in, defensive lineman Bear Alexander from Georgia, which is a huge addition. Wide receiver Dorian Singer and cornerback Christian Roland Wallace, both coming in from Arizona. Defensive lineman Anthony Lucas from Texas A&M. And then, like I said, there are many others with them. Returning players, I think it's obvious who the number one is. Guy won the Heisman last year, quarterback Caleb Williams, probably going to be first pick in the draft next year. Wide receiver Mario Williams and Taj Washington, both back for him. Safety Callan Bullock. What are your thoughts on year 2 for Lincoln Riley in LA?
Big expectations, man. They can't lose to Utah twice again. That Cotton Bowl game was, like you said, fantastic. They only lost by 1 point there, but that was a hell of a game. I've got USC they're going to be really fun to watch this year. We're going to jump into college football picks or college football playoff picks here in not too terribly long. I do have USC is one of my 4 teams in the college football playoff. So, so long as they can keep everybody healthy, like you said, transfer portal just absolutely killed it. It's so hard to keep up with all this stuff, dude. There are so many moving parts and pieces with all this transfer portal shit. It's almost like a reset. I mean, there's more players moving around here than virtually any other league that we follow. So
yeah,
it'll be interesting to see how, now that this is becoming the norm, how quickly these guys set into their new offensive playbooks and things like that, or offense and defensive playbooks, I should say. But yeah, as far as Pac-12, hell of a way to kick off their final year. This is going to be probably possibly anyway, the most fun conference to watch of all of the ones that we're going to cover here today. I do have USC in the Pac-12 championship game, but yeah, their UFC is looking good, and Caleb Williams, we'll see what happens. It's not easy, obviously, to win that Heisman 2 times in a row. It's not been done since the 50s, but he's got a chance to do it. So we'll see how this season plays out.
Yep, and one of their biggest competitions this year, second plus 320, Washington Huskies. Last year finished 11-2, 7-2 in the conference. They did lose back-to-back games against UCLA and Arizona State. Both of those were on the road. Like I mentioned earlier, they did finish the season by beating Texas in the Alamo Bowl, bringing back 14 guys, 7 on offense, 7 on defense. They did lose quarterback Sam Heward to Cal Poly and edge rusher Savell Smalls to Colorado. Guys they brought in, running back Dylan Johnson from Mississippi State, wide receiver Jeremy Bernard from Michigan State, and cornerback Jabbar Muhammad from Oklahoma State. Returning players, another Heisman favorite, quarterback Michael Penix Jr. If Ohio State has wide receiver room number 1, Washington has 1B. These guys are awesome. Rome Odunze and Jalen McMillan, I absolutely love watching this. They are very fun to watch. And then you flip it to the defensive side. Braylon Trice is an absolute force on the defensive line. I mentioned him last week, and players that aren't quarterbacks to watch. This is, like I said, last year I loved this team. I bet on them every single week. This is one of the more fun teams to watch in college football. Kalen DeBauer, I have nothing but respect for what he does as a head coach. He's been incredible literally everywhere he's been. What are your opinion on the Washington Huskies?
If anybody's going to knock UFC off the pedestal, it's going to be Washington. DeBauer in his second year, 7 returning starters, like he said. Michael Penix Jr. is in the Heisman conversation. They had losses to UCLA and Arizona State last year. They do have a much tougher schedule this year with the road trip to Michigan State early, USC and Utah back-to-back in November, and then at Oregon State November 18th. So they'll be battle-tested for sure. But yeah, I think if there's going to be anybody that's going to give them a run, them being USC a run in the Pac-12 championship, I think it's going to be Washington.
Yeah, that's one thing I was noticing when I was looking at the Pac-12 is I don't think if anyone goes undefeated, they're the greatest team in college football because these schedules are crazy. Like,
yeah,
none of and that's where I benefit them as opposed to this horseshit the SEC pulls with their scheduling. These guys actually play each other, and you can't fault them for playing their conference. The SEC should take some lessons on that.
No kidding.
Scheduling what they're playing, it's awful. We're going to move on to number 3, Oregon plus 340. Last year, 10-3, 7-2 in the conference. Lost the very first game of the year to Georgia. And then they did lose to Washington and Oregon State in the Civil War. They finished the year beating North Carolina in the Holiday Bowl. Big loss, though. Offensive coordinator Kenny Dillingham, like I mentioned last week, did leave to be the head coach at Arizona State. Replacing him will be an offensive coordinator from University of Texas San Antonio, Will Stein. Bringing back 11 starters, 5 on offense, 6 on defense. Some transfers, lost wide receiver Dante Thornton to Tennessee, Justin Flo, linebacker to Arizona. Guys they brought in, edge rusher Jordan Birch from South Carolina, safety Evan Williams from Fresno State, which is a sad loss. I love him. Trayshawn Holden, wide receiver from Alabama, and linebacker Justin Jacobs from Iowa. Oh, and wide receiver Gary Bryant Jr. from USC, which I mentioned earlier. Returning key players, quarterback Bo Nix. He's tough to judge. He's kind of been through it. He's had a new offensive coordinator so many times in his career, including this year. Kenny did good things with him last year. I mean, he looked way better last year than he did at Auburn. And like I mentioned last week, I think Kenny's kind of like the quarterback whisperer. He does great things with quarterbacks. So it's going to be interesting to see what Bo looks like this year without him. Bringing back both running backs, Bucky Irving and Noah Whittington, wide receiver Troy Franklin, and defensive lineman Brandon Dorless. What is your thoughts on the season for the Ducks?
We'll see. They got absolutely walloped by Georgia last year to start the season. So, I plus 340, I think, is a little bit of a stretch. It's a little too close to Washington. I think Washington's a much better team. Dan Lanning's second year. Bo Nix right now is in the Heisman conversation, but I don't really see him being there at the end of it. At Washington, October 14th, home against USC November 11th, and then home against Oregon State November 24th were 3 of the games that I call out as their tougher games in the schedule. But yeah, to be honest with you, this Utah team that we're about to talk about, I think could be potentially above Oregon when all is said and done.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing I do want to note is the Civil War better goddamn continue when these assholes go to the Big Ten. If they get rid of the Civil War, college football is getting disgraced day by day with some of these nonsense changes. But the Civil War is the Civil War is a game that has to happen. And I also, one other thing, I believe that the reason Oregon had a little bit of a boost, because I couldn't figure out why they were a little bit better odds than some of the teams. I think that they don't play. I think their conference schedule is a little easier than some of the others, if I remember right. I think there's something about that, but I haven't looked at it in a little bit. But yeah, like you mentioned,
they don't play Utah.
Utah. Okay, I knew they was one of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
but like you mentioned, Utah plus 550. Last year, 10-4, 7-2 in the conference. They did win the Pac-12 championship, beating USC. They finished the season with a loss to Penn State in the Rose Bowl, which that game was going very well for Utah until quarterback Cam Rising tore his ACL. All reports are Cam Rising will be there for the Florida game, not this Saturday, or actually I believe they play on Friday. Not this Friday, but next Friday. So hopefully Cam Rising is back, because he's, again, another fun player to watch, and it was pretty devastating, that injury in the Rose Bowl. They're bringing back 13 starters, 6 on offense, 7 on defense. Some guys that know: offensive lineman Paul Malay to BYU, linebacker Mason Tafuga to Oregon State, while bringing in quarterback Miles Battle from Ole Miss, edge rusher Logan Fano from BYU. And like I mentioned earlier, they did bring in wide receiver Micah Pittman from Florida State. Key players returning, we had just mentioned him, Cam Rising off the ACL injury. Tight end Brant Keithy, wide receiver Devon Vele, and defensive end Van Fillinger. So Utah, what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, what the hell happens between college football and the NFL when it comes to these names? I think
all of the Polynesian players have to switch their names when they go to the NFL.
Yeah, I think that's probably the case. Utah season is completely going to hinge on whether or not Rising's going to be healthy. Coming off that torn ACL, it happened in the Rose Bowl, so we'll see if he's even healthy enough to really play. I haven't heard much about it yet, but if he is healthy, they could take a third straight Pac-12 championship, but it's going to be a tough road to get there regardless. Once they actually get to the Pac-12 championship, that's what happens. I do not have them in there. I have a colossal battle of USC versus Washington. I do have USC coming out on top this year, but I would not be surprised at all if Washington ends up taking that game. But that is my conference championship picks, is USC and Washington. Don't really think Utah is going to be there. If Rising, like I said, does come in, plays healthy, they've got a outsider's chance, and I think they honestly have more of a chance than Oregon. But I think it's going to be USC Washington. I think USC is going to win.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I agree with Oregon kind of being a little bit below. And honestly, one of the teams I'm kind of big on this year, just because they had such a great year last year, was Oregon State. Like, I think Oregon State might be able to make some noise in this conference, and their schedule is a little easier too. And I mean, if they pull like one upset, they could end up being the one in Vegas for the conference championship, just because of how brutal some of these guys' schedules are. I have the exact same game as you. I do have Washington playing USC. I have a little bit of a different outcome. I have the Huskies at plus 320 winning the Pac-12. Big shocker there, I know. But I do think that'll be a great game. We do get a preview of it in the regular season also. Kind of like the Florida State Clemson game thing. I hope we get to see these games twice, because they're what college football's about. These are going to be great games.
Absolutely.
All right, here we go to the SEC. Georgia's bullshit schedule.
Less surprised.
Minus 110 to win the conference. That should tell you something.
Yeah.
Last year, 15-0, 8-0 in the conference, beat LSU to win the SEC championship, beat Ohio State in the college football playoff semifinal, and killed TCU in the national championship. Little bit of change. Offensive coordinator Todd Monken is gone. went to the Baltimore Ravens, which opened the door for the return of offensive coordinator Mike Bobo. He's been on the staff 3 times already, I think. Bringing back 12 starters, 6 on offense, 6 on defense. I actually have quite a bit of notes here on the portal for them. They lost Adonai Mitchell to Texas, which was a wide receiver. Lost defensive lineman Bear Alexander to USC, which we mentioned in theirs as being a huge addition. Cornerback Jaheim Singletary to Arkansas. Cornerback Marcus Washington to Louisville. Linebacker Tresman Marshall to Alabama. What? Why are we doing this again? Wide receiver, bringing in guys, wide receiver Don Lovett from Missouri. Smoke Bowie, another great name, came in from Texas A&M, but just 2 days ago decided, you know what, I'm going to re-enter the portal, so who the hell knows where he's going to play. So he's back in free agency. Wide receiver Ra Thomas from Mississippi State. Some key players returning. Tight end Brock Bowers, absolutely ridiculous player. He's unbelievable. It's going to be fun to watch. Wide receiver Ladd McConkey. Cedric Van Pran at center. Linebacker Jamon Dumas Johnson. DB Malachi Starks, and defensive lineman Michael Williams. One other thing to note, Carson Beck has been named their starting quarterback, which last week I gave out as a potential bet to win the Heisman, just because their schedule sucks, and I think by default he's going to be in New York.
Yep.
I put a bet in after that episode. It's got great odds, and I have a pretty good feeling he's going to be in New York. What are your thoughts on the Georgia season?
I mean, I agree with you as far as Carson Beck being in New York at the end of the year. I'd be surprised if he's not there. The question here is, can they three-peat? I think they got 61 of 66 first-place votes, which I honestly don't know where the other 5 votes went to. It stands to reason why they are where they are. They've gone 29-1 in the past 2 years. Offense looks in good shape. Defense continues to be solid. Minus 110. I mean, let's be real here.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
And especially when we move on to the second team in the East is Tennessee, and they're plus 1,500.
1,500.
Yeah, then they're second in the East.
Yeah.
So
and that's the best. That they were the best team in the nation offensively last year, plus 1,500.
Yeah, and it's like, well, they have no chance.
Yeah.
Second place team. So just to run through them, even though probably isn't going to matter. Finished 11-2 last year, 6-2 in the conference. They lost to Georgia and South Carolina. Ended the year beating Clemson in the Orange Bowl. And that was with their this year quarterback Joe Milton because Hendon Hooker was hurt. Bringing back 12 starters, 7 on offense, 5 on defense. Some guys to note, they did lose quarterback Taven Jackson to IU, which he is going to be in a battle to start week 1 against Ohio State for IU, but they don't want to name it because they want to keep it a secret because that's what they do there. Defensive lineman Jordan Phillips to Maryland, running back Justin William Thomas to Cal, and then they brought in wide receiver Dante Thornton Jr. from Oregon, tight end McAllen Castles from UC Davis, and linebacker Keenan Pillai from BYU. Key player returning, quarterback Joe Milton, like I just mentioned. He did play a little bit when Hendon Hooker got hurt. Another great name in college football, wide receiver Squirrel White. Got to throw it to the squirrel, Joe. Brew McCoy, wide receiver. DB Wesley Walker and Brandon Turnage, and D lineman Tyler Barron. Like we kind of mentioned, I don't think it matters, but what are your thoughts on Tennessee?
Yeah, I don't think it matters. We'll see. Joe Milton's got a little bit of experience there. They do return their top 3 running backs, which I think is last year or last episode we talked about that a little bit. Combined, they averaged, I think, 6 yards a carry and 29 rushing touchdowns. So Josh Heupel's offense is working. I don't know if they're going to hit 46 points a game like they did last year. 5 of their first 6 games are in Tennessee, with their first big game being in the Swamp on September 16th. So if they can leave Gainesville with a win, and then I think they're playing Texas A&M at Rocky Top, and then they have Bama the very next week. So if they can get through that schedule with a bunch of wins, it's likely that they'll be a top 3 to 5 team when they host Georgia on November 18th. But at that point in time, it's not going to matter because I will be very surprised if Georgia just doesn't put an absolute thumping on them. So, yeah, I don't know that it really matters here as much as I would like it to.
Yeah, and I think we mentioned that in the last episode that the only game for Georgia that's even remotely matters is the at Tennessee game, just because that's the only game that's even remotely close. But what's remotely close? I mean, I don't think it's going to be that great of a game, to be honest. We're going to jump over to the West. Favorite in the West, Alabama. They are plus 300 to win the conference. 11-2 last year, 6-2 in the conference. End of the year beating Kansas State in the Sugar Bowl, bringing back 9 starters, 4 on offense, 5 on defense. Offensive coordinator Tommy Rees coming over from Notre Dame, and then defensive coordinator Kevin Steele, which again, just like Mike Bobo, this guy just keeps coming back to Saban. I think this is his 3rd time on the staff also. Big question here, who is the quarterback? Is it Jalen Milroe? Is it Ty Simpson? Is it Notre Dame transfer Tyler Buckner? Truly do not know. They're not really releasing much of anything from there, so it's kind of one of those things we'll probably see when the games start. Some transfers to note: lost offensive lineman Javion Cohen to Miami, Trayshawn Holden to Oregon, JoJo Early to TCU, and wide receiver Aaron Henderson to LSU. Bringing in tight end CJ Dupree from Maryland, linebacker Tresman Marshall from Georgia, and safety Jalen Key from UAB. Again, another Georgia to Alabama transfer. I don't get it. Key players returning: offensive lineman J.C. Latham, another great name, cornerback Kool-Aid McKinstry, wide receiver Ja'Cory Brooks, and linebacker Dallas Turner. What do you think for Bama in the West?
Well, I think this is going to be a much different division, versus the East. The East is a shoo-in. Right now, I think the West is between Bama and LSU. I am a little surprised that LSU and Bama aren't flip-flopped because of the questions around quarterback. LSU, which we'll talk about here in just a minute, they won against Bama last year. They took the SEC West title. They got a Citrus Bowl victory, and that was all in year 1 for Brian Kelly. So we'll see how everything shakes out. It'll be interesting to see that battle in the SEC West between these guys, LSU, and possibly Texas A&M. Depends on if Jimbo can get them to bounce back or not. But yeah, I'm kind of like you. I'm sitting here waiting to see what happens as far as the quarterback situation goes, and I don't know that there's necessarily a front runner.
Yeah, and then also the one other thing to note is just from changes from the last few years with the different OCs Alabama's had, seems like we might kind of get back to the Alabama days of more running the ball and playing good defense, which I don't think that's going to work at this point. Like, it could work then, but there's so much change in offenses now, and they're so high powered that like trying that might make them have a worse year than, like, they might end up 8-4 doing that. So
that's not going to work against LSU. That's for sure.
Right. And I don't think it'll work against A&M either. So it's an interesting thing to see. And I agree with what you just said a few minutes ago with why is LSU not the favorite in the West? Because I kind of think the same thing. Jumping to them, they are plus 460 to win the conference. Last year finished 10-4, 6-2 in the conference. They lost the SEC championship game to Georgia. And then they ended the year killing Purdue in the Citrus Bowl, 63-7. Like, that game was a joke. Returning 12 starters, 8 on offense, 4 on defense. And like I said earlier, this is the portal team. Like, this team, Florida State brought in a lot of guys, USC brought in a lot of guys, but this team, well, here we go, and this isn't everyone. So just to note some guys they lost: quarterback Walker Howard to Ole Miss, linebacker DeMario Tolan to Auburn, running back Derek Davis Jr. to Pitt. And they brought in everyone on earth. Cornerback Devin Harris from Texas A&M, which, big story last week from him, and especially with the injury from the other corner from Ohio State. So he started a fight in practice. They kicked him out. They sent him off the team for personal matters is what they noted it. And Brian Kelly said he could be back soon, which he did come back yesterday to practice, but they haven't released anything on status if he will be playing week 1 against Florida State. I would assume Brian Kelly's going to have him in there week 1 just because I don't think they're going to be down 2 top corners against our offense. But yeah, that's a huge deal if he ends up being suspended for that game. But Brian Kelly doesn't have the best morals, so I don't think that's going to happen. Cornerback Zy Alexander from Southeastern. And here's the other cornerback, J.K. Johnson from Ohio State, which he is the injured one I was talking about. They also brought in cornerback Deuce Chestnut from Syracuse and wide receiver Aaron Anderson from Bama. So stupid. Running back Logan Diggs from Notre Dame and defensive line Paris Shan from Arizona. So key players returning: quarterback Jaden Daniels had a pretty good year last year. Wide receiver Malik Neighbors, which I mentioned last week. I absolutely love Malik Neighbors. He is fun to watch. He's like your one of the fastest guys on earth. Linebacker Harold Perkins and defensive tackle Mason Smith. What do you got on the Tigers?
Well, I think Brian Kelly continues to stack on top of what he did last year, minus game one. I think Florida State's going to take that game. It's going to be a tough one, but I think Florida State takes that game. There on out, though, looking at their schedule, I don't see a loss on their record. Jaden Daniels is returning to lead the offense, like you mentioned. He should have a better O-line in front of him this year than last year. They bring back a solid running back core. The question mark here is the defense, which struggled a little bit last year against some of the tougher opponents. But to your point, I don't think they're going to go without their top two guys there coming into Florida State. So I don't know what kind of slap in the wrist is going to come his way outside of what already happened. But
hopefully he doesn't put him in a scissor lift on a windy day. So
so I've got, the teams that we're talking about here are who I have coming out with the divisions as far as the top two on each side. So Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, LSU. I've got LSU playing Georgia in the SEC championship game, and I can't go against Georgia. I can't go against Georgia. That's what it boils down to. I've got Georgia, LSU in the SEC championship game, and I've got Georgia coming out on top.
Yep, that's another conference where we have matched. I have the exact same thing. Georgia minus 110 beating LSU. It's going to be tough to see. Maybe Bama gives a resurgence, and A&M I think is the outlier. I don't think there's many other teams that could even make a noise, but I am interested for A&M just to see what happens there. We're going to finish it off as we talked about last week. One of the divisions we're always going to talk about, or conferences on this show we're always going to talk about, is the MAC. Mighty Ball State, of course, will be represented. And honestly, the MAC is fun. I mean, you get the weekday games, some fun offenses to watch. It's actually pretty fun football to watch. We're going to start off with the West Division. Favorite is Toledo at plus 180. Last year, 9-5, 5-3 in the conference. They did win the MAC championship by beating Ohio 17-7. Finished the year beating Liberty in the Boca Raton Bowl. Bringing back 16 starters, 8 on offense, 8 on defense. Bringing back a ton of guys. Some portal news to note. They did lose Mikael Barkley to Fresno State, but they did add wide receiver Jaden Dutton from Penn State. Edge rusher Travion Ford from Missouri also coming in for him. Some key players returning: quarterback DeQuan Finn, running back Jacquez Stewart, Jerwan Newton at wide receiver, and linebacker Dallas Gant. The entire starting secondary is back for Toledo, which is huge. Do you have any thoughts on the Rockets?
9-5 last year. I think they could improve on that record. They've been in 6 bowl games in the past 8 years. You mentioned DeQuan Finn. He's a hell of a dual threat quarterback. They were second in scoring in the MAC last year. I can see them being first this year. As far as the West is concerned, I see Toledo as obviously the front runner.
Yep, and right behind them, quite the gap here from plus 180 to plus 900. Eastern Michigan, second in the West. Last year, 9-4, 5-3 in the conference. They ended the year with a win over San Jose State in the famous Idaho Potato Bowl. Returning 11 starters, 4 on offense, 7 on defense. Some portal news to note: offensive tackle Marcellus Johnson went to Missouri, and wide receiver Darius Laster went to BYU. They did bring in wide receiver Javon Swinton from IU, and then wide receiver Terry Lockett from Michigan State. So bringing in some Big Ten rejects to help them boost the receiving squad. Key players returning: wide receiver Samson Evans, quarterback Austin Smith, which he did play a little bit last year as a freshman, so it'll be nice to have him back. Wide receiver Tanner Kuhn, linebacker Chase Klein, and linebacker Joe Sparatio. Any thoughts on the team from Ypsilanti, our famous McDonald's we used to stop at on the way to Ford Field?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We got that second bowl win in team's history last year, so that was good for them. They do have a tough, grimy defensive team that keeps them in games. But there's a reason why they're plus 900. As far as the West is concerned, Toledo is going to be the team to beat.
Yep. Jump over to the East, and the way I kind of talk about Kansas State and the Big 12 is the way I'm going to talk about this team. I'm a pretty big fan of this team. I love this team, actually. Ohio plus 330. Last year, 10-4, 7-1 in the conference. They did lose the MAC championship game to Toledo last year, but they beat Wyoming in the Arizona Bowl. Bringing back 15 starters, 9 on offense, 6 on defense. They did lose Denzel Daxon to Illinois, and a kicker, Nathaniel Vacos to Wisconsin. Brought in running back Tristan Cox from Purdue. Key players returning, Curtis Rourke, quarterback. Probably would have won the MAC last year if he didn't get hurt. He's as fun to watch a quarterback in college football as there is. Running back Sai Bangera, wide receiver Sam, and this is a name I don't even know. You can't even guess this name. Wigloose. 4 starters on the offensive line, linebacker Bryce Houston and linebacker Key Thompson. Like I said, I absolutely love Ohio. Do you have any thoughts on the Bobcats?
No, I mean, MAC Offensive Player of the Year, Curtis Rourke, is returning the quarterback. So as far as the East is concerned, I think the Bobcats are going to be the front runners here, but not much to talk about there. Curtis Rourke coming back will be obviously key to them. So they don't have much competition.
And this projected second in the East, Buffalo at plus 700. Last year, 7-6, 5-3 in the conference. They did end the year with a win in the Camellia Bowl against Georgia Southern. I'm sure that had high ratings. They're bringing back 10 starters, 5 on offense, 5 on defense. Portal news to note, they did lose safety Keyshawn Cobb to West Virginia, but they did, however, bring in 9 players, led by edge rusher Jair Stevens from Lafayette. Some key players returning, both running backs, Ron Cook and Mike Washington. Quarterback Cole Snyder's back to go with wide receiver Marlon Johnson. So, I mean, the offense is kind of good. They're bringing back a lot of experience. Defensive tackle Damon Williams and linebacker Sean Dolick. Any thoughts on Buffalo?
Yeah, I mean, they've improved by 4 games from the last year, so they're moving up. Going 7-6. Senior Cole Snyder, he was decent last year, 3,000 passing yards, 18 touchdowns. They have a 13 All-American at safety and Marcus Fuqua, however the hell you say his last name.
Lord Farquaad.
Lord Farquaad, yeah. And then we also have the nation's leading solo tackler last year at linebacker in Sean Dolock, I believe is his last name. So
yep.
Won that bowl game last year, so they should be able to compete in the MAC East. I still see Ohio coming out from the East, but Buffalo can be in there.
All right. Normally we've done 4 teams every conference, but like we mentioned, we've got a special team, so we're going to do 5 in this one. And everyone,
right.
get your bet slips ready because at plus 4,000, this is easy money. Picked to finish 5th in the West at plus 4,000. The mighty Ball State Cardinals last year finished 5-7, 3-7 in the conference, bringing back 14 starters, 7 on offense, 7 on defense. Surprisingly, have some portal movement, quite a bit of it actually. They did lose stud running back Carson Steele and his pet alligator have moved to Westwood to go to UCLA. Quarterback John Paddock to Illinois. Guys coming in, though, wide receiver Ty Robinson from Colorado, quarterback Lane Hatcher from Texas State, which will be the starter. Yep. Marquez Cooper from Kent State, which will also be starting. So the backfield's all new. It's going to be starting guys. Some guys that they are returning, though, the pride of Delta High School, tight end Brady Hunt. Mackey Award watch list. Tight end Tanner Kozul will be behind him. Then we also got defensive tackle John Harris, defensive end Tavion Woodard, linebacker Clayton Cole, and linebacker Cole Pierce. What are your thoughts on the Fighting Football Cardinals?
Well, first I need to correct you because the pride of Delta High School is Chris Overholt. It's not Brady Hunt.
Well, that's his protege. It was his coach.
There we go. Texas State grad transfer Lane Hatcher is going to be interesting. He's got over 10,000 career passing yards, so I'll be interested to see how he fits into New's offense. Junior transfer Marquez Cooper coming in to play running back, replacing Carson Steele. So Carson Steele's a big loss, but Marquez Cooper is a relatively decent replacement in that regard. All MAC tight end Brady Hunt, Delta graduate. It's where both of us went to high school, so excited to see him continue. They got Tavion Woodard and Jack Sape are returning key players on defense. You also have Clayton Cole, Cole Pierce, Sidney Houston playing linebacker. So I'm huge Ball State fan, so we'll see how this season plays out. Mike New could be on the hot seat. I don't see it happening. We talked about this a little bit in the last episode, but it's possible. He's been there for quite a while, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, baby, it's straight money plus 4,000. Let's go.
Yeah, don't bet your mortgage. I'm not sure it's that great of a bet.
Too late.
All right, so let's move to the prediction at the greatest stadium in the NFL, Ford Field. MAC championship game. Who will be there for you?
As much as I would love to say my mighty Ball State Cardinals will be there, I see Toledo in Ohio.
Yep, that is the exact game I have. Who do you have winning it?
Toledo.
I had a feeling you were going to say Toledo. I am Ohio. So we've had a lot of the same conference championship games with some different winners. I think we might have agreed on 2 of them, maybe 3. So, all right. That is it for the previews of the Power 5 and the MAC. Now we're going to give you our college football playoff predictions. Who do you have? Did you seed them when you did it?
No, I've just got Rose Bowl and Sugar Bowl games.
Okay. So what do you have for the semifinal games?
Rose Bowl, I've got Florida State playing Penn State. And for the Sugar Bowl, I have Georgia playing USC.
All right, so we're very similar there, and this will make a lot of sense because of our predictions. So I've got Georgia playing Washington, and I have Michigan playing Florida State in my semifinal games. So Who do you have coming out of those, and who is your national champion?
I would like to see Florida State play USC. That's what I would like to see. What I think is going to happen is going to be Florida State and Georgia. That's my guess. As much as I would love to see Florida State win the national championship, I don't know if they're going to be able to overtake Georgia. It's going to be really tough, but that's my pick. So I've got Florida State over Penn State in the Rose Bowl. I've got Georgia over USC in the Sugar Bowl, and I've got Georgia winning the national title again.
So it's almost like we did this together and made these lists because I have Georgia beating Washington. I would absolutely love to see Washington win that game because I would love a Florida State-Washington national championship, but I don't think that's going to happen. I do have Georgia beating Washington. I have Florida State beating Michigan, setting up the Georgia-Florida State game just like you had. And just like most of our others, I have picked a different winner. It's a homer pick, I know, but this team is loaded. I love them. I'm taking Florida State, as some friends of mine used to always say because Bobby said it. Florida State's national contenders this year. And how can you not love it that they're back in the title picture? I think it's going to be such a fun time. Even if they lose the 2 games in September, even if they lose to LSU and Clemson, the season's not over with the change in the conference, which is huge.
Yeah.
Any other things to note on the college football playoff?
No, I mean, the only way I'm going to flip to Florida State is if Jameis Winston's on the sidelines there eating W's.
Oh, he will be. He'll be there, and
W's and crab legs.
He'll be given the greatest locker room speech of all time if that happens.
I don't doubt that one bit.
So what we're going to do to finish this, and this will be more of a recurring theme starting next week, and it's going to be incredible. We're finally picking games. I'm very excited about this. We're going to do these in time order for next week. So we're going to kick it off at 2:30 p.m. live from Dublin, Ireland.
Dublin.
Navy versus Notre Dame. Notre Dame is minus 20.5-point favorite. It's going to be a little interesting this year to see what the service academies do on offense because college football, again, like I mentioned earlier, like what is going on with some of these rules that they're doing? The service academies are all going to basically be running their option offense from the shotgun now because they're not allowed to cut block anymore, which they tell the defense they must go low, but the offense can't go low anymore. So it's like, get something correct here because this doesn't make any sense. It's just not right. And these service academies are already at disadvantage, and now it's going to be interesting to see what they end up looking like with these new offenses. New head coach for Navy. Notre Dame bringing in Sam Hartman from Wake Forest. It'll be his first game. There is a lot of turnover on Notre Dame's roster. I will give it to you for the first pick. Who are you going to be picking in this game? Notre Dame is minus 20.5 versus Navy in Dublin, Ireland.
I've got Notre Dame.
I went with Navy. I think Navy's offense, unless it's just so drastically terrible with the way they've had to change it, I think they're going to be able to keep up with them, and Notre Dame has enough changes on their roster that Navy is going to be able to keep this a game. 20.5 is probably about right. I think Notre Dame's going to end up winning by probably 15-16, so I think Navy sneaks in with a backdoor cover. Plus, that's a long way to travel. Notre Dame, they have some Guinness before the game, and don't worry about playing, hopefully.
Do we have any idea on how much ahead of time they're going to be in Ireland?
I would assume 2:30 is probably like a night game. I would think that's probably like a 6:30, 7:30 p.m. there. Not positive on that, but I would assume that's around a 5-hour time difference.
Gotcha.
Moving next, 5:30 p.m. on the East Coast. Got UTEP. They are a 1.5-point favorite at Jacksonville State. It's Jacksonville State's first game in the FBS and their first Conference USA game because they are brand new to the FBS and Conference USA. UTEP also Conference USA now. Rich Rodriguez bringing his Jacksonville State team to the FBS. I'm pretty big on them. I followed them a little bit last year in the 2A, and I mean they're a fun team to watch. And Rich Rod, I think he has one successful year in the FBS, and I think he might be at a bigger school again. I'm actually going to start this at Jacksonville State, first game in the FBS. Give me them. I'll take the 1.5. I think they win the game outright.
Okay, this is the second time in a row we're disagreeing here because I've got UTEP winning it.
So 7 p.m. on the East Coast, UMass at New Mexico State. New Mexico State is -7.5. New Mexico State has moved to Conference USA. I have had a rule for about the last 3 years, maybe 4 years now in college football. I will always bet against UMass. They suck. New Mexico State -7.5. I will bet it until UMass proves me wrong.
Yeah, as much as I would like to pick, University of Marcus Canby, I'm going to go with New Mexico State as well.
The best game of the day, 7 p.m. My beloved MAC, Ohio. I just talked about how much I love this team. What a test to start the year at San Diego State. San Diego State is a 3-point favorite. San Diego State had a lot of turnover on defense, though. And Ohio, like we mentioned, their offense is going to be very good. I will take Ohio plus the 3 on the road at San Diego State.
Yep, this is the second time in a row. Then we're going to agree here because I've got Ohio winning as well.
And by far, that's the best game of the day, I think. 7:30 p.m. on the East, Hawaii coming to Vandy. Vandy is a 16.5-point favorite. Vandy went to the Islands last year, beat them 63-10. This is the second year for Hawaii with head coach Timmy Chang. I honestly wanted to pick Hawaii here, but I think Vandy might be just too much early. I think Hawaii, as the year goes on, is going to keep getting better and might be a little bit more dangerous. But week 1, Vandy, I'm sure everyone's seen the pictures on the internet. Their stadium is destroyed. It doesn't even have seats in the end zones, and it's kind of a joke. There's a lot of construction going on there. But Hawaii, they're not used to playing in front of fans anyways. What does it matter? Vandy -16.5 is my pick.
I'm with you. I pick Vandy.
Going to get a look at Caleb Williams early in the year. 8 p.m. on the East Coast, San Jose State is traveling to the Coliseum. USC -30.5. My note for this is, can San Jose State. Can San Jose State's offense keep up with USC's defense? USC's defense last year was their weak point. It was god-awful. San Jose State actually can score. Like, that's one thing they can do. So it's kind of that first test for USC's defense. 30.5 is a lot of points. I do think USC comes out to make a statement, so I have them covering this.
I have them covering them as well. I think this is going to be a statement game. This is a year where they could potentially be in the college football playoff, and Caleb Williams is making another run at Heisman again. So yeah, I think this is going to be a thumping.
Oh, you froze up.
Froze up? Yeah. Just to be clear, then
there you are.
USC is my
USC.
Pick.
Okay.
Yeah.
Last game, 9 p.m. on the East Coast. The airport, Florida International, traveling to Louisiana Tech -10.5. This is a Conference USA game. So Conference USA is going at it early. Week 1, they've got a lot of conference games. Last year, Florida International did win the game 42-34 in overtime. The over-under this year is only 58.5, which I find kind of odd because, last year they put up 76 points. FIU is an improving team. La Tech does bring in Boise State transfer quarterback Hank Bachmeier. What are your thoughts on that one?
I've got Louisiana Tech.
I do as well, covering the 10.5. So that does it for the picks. For every week, we are going to have a lock. What is your one lock for the week?
My lock for this week is the USC game.
So you've got USC -30.5 as your lock. My lock is Ohio +3. And actually, I said also throw some on the money line at +125. I think they beat San Diego State outright in that game. All right. So that was a lot of preview, a lot of picks. Any other thoughts you have on this week?
I'm just so excited for this season to get going. I'm glad week 0 is here. And I'm looking forward to seeing how all this shakes out.
All right. Well, That is Reese. I am Jacob. We are going to close out this episode. We'll be back next week with week 1 picks and tons of games next week. It's going to be a lot of fun next week.
That's right.
We'll give you some results of what happened with these picks, and look forward to having everyone like and subscribe to our videos. Check us out on YouTube. Download the podcast. Tell everyone, watch these assholes. They're good. See you guys later.
Cheers, guys.